Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Printfluencers, a Rackame-sponsored podcast where we challenge how the print and mail industry thinks about growth, operations, leadership, all that good stuff. And today we're tackling vendor management and what companies need to be rethinking as we move into 2026. Because really, the old model was simple. You had something I needed, I paid you, end of story. But today's print environments, they're so integrated and automated. And a lot of those silos that traditionally existed, well, we've just blown those up. Everything is talking to everybody else. And so the question really becomes, if our systems have to work together, shouldn't our vendors? And what does that look like? And how do we incentivize that? So, to explore that topic, I'm joined by two of my fellow Branding United All Stars. Hello, hello. Joanne Gore of Joanne Gore Communications, and then Mark Pomerantz, owner of Sales Wisdom. Hello, you guys.
Hi, Caitlin. Thanks for
Hello,
having us.
Caitlin. Great to be here. Good to see you. Hello, Joanne.
Yeah, thanks for joining. I think you guys are my first repeat customers on the Printfluencers network. So thanks for coming back.
Thank you. Honored.
Anytime.
All right. So I think we're going to be able to talk about this for hours, but we only have 35 minutes. So let's just jump in and get started. And Mark, I think I'm going to start with you because in the pre-show, we were talking about the history. So if you're going to be our little historian for today, take us on a journey here. Tee us up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's longevity gets you history as well, too. So no, thanks, Caitlin. As I read your premise, which I told you, I love this topic. It's a great topic and we could speak forever. I thought about where have we come in this evolution of vendor management, vendor relations. And if you just think of our industry, even just the past, let's say 40 or 50 years, we used to have custom manufacturing presses, made on, one at a time, custom for people. We went from this big mechanical engineering type of relationships. And then you had these proprietary systems in pre-press, and then desktop publishing and PostScript came along and blew up everything for a little while. Then you had all of these system integrators at one time there, and they then got acquired by the OEMs, and then you morphed into digital workflows and digital print. So it's interesting that it's the technology that's really forced this issue to the surface, and I think it's a great issue to be on the surface. And the big winner in this, to me, is the end user, the customer, the print service provider, because I feel like they've been asking for this type of thing for a long time. Now the vendors are being forced to do this, and technology is an enabler to make it happen. So I think it's an exciting time and a great topic to be talking about for sure.
Thank you. Yeah. Because, like, from Rackame's perspective, and I usually don't talk a lot about Rackame on the show, but in this instance, I was like, oh, wow, really drawing from personal experience. We're an integration platform. So we connect into all of the, existing systems out there that a client or a print service provider might already have in place. So that might be, pre-press software, postal software, composition software, your actual hardware, your printers, your inserters. And so we kind of have all of these tentacles that bring in data and have it, where you orchestrate it and have it flow through your workflows. And because we're that orchestration platform where we host, a lot of data, or at least have access to a lot of data, we started to see that we had to become experts in a lot of third-party software. And, when something breaks, it'll show up on our dashboard. And it might, have broken upriver or upstream, but until we kind of go through and sort and ferret out what happened, you really just don't know. And so that's usually us having to make calls to other vendors or get the client on the phone, and it can really devolve into finger pointing very quickly. And so we realized, well, golly, that's annoying and unhelpful, and it takes way too much time. So, but on the flip side, for example, I've got a customer right now on a current project where they were the middleman between our team and I think, Quadient. And they were the communication broker. And about halfway through, we realized, why are we doing that? We are both on the same NDAs. We both know the customer's environment. We took the customer out of the equation and just started talking to each other. And I mean, the speed just like 10x on that project. And so we started thinking, well, why are we just not doing that all of the time? And so that's where I started to think, okay, we've gotten to, strategic supplier management and customer success programs with our clients where we're talking to them one-on-one, really learning the business, talking about strategy. But if they're doing that with each of their vendors, how are all of those strategies aligning into one core strategy? So, Joanne, from a marketing perspective, what are you seeing out there with that?
There's so much to touch on, Caitlin, of what you were talking about. So I'm going to take a little trip down memory lane as well.
Yes.
I spent most of my time on the software side of things, less so on the hardware, although I was at Compaq for a while. But again, this was way, way, way before anybody even knew what a personal computer was. So I don't know how much that really counts. From a software perspective, I've always wondered why we don't talk to each other. And again, I understand competitiveness and the competitive nature, and you don't want to, spill the tea. But at the same time, if you're working with the same customers and you are offering complementary solutions, I'm not talking, one MIS talking to another MIS uh, because let's say the client switched. We're not
Mm-hmm.
talking about those conversations. We're talking about the ones that you just outlined, where there are various um, pieces of technology all feeding each other. It is no different than marketing in the sense of we need to know ultimately what the story is we're trying to tell. What is it that we're trying to achieve, and how are we going to get there as quickly as possible? From marketing, I'm always looking at, well, what do we want the client, the person reading this to do next? And how do we get them to do that as quickly as possible? In this scenario, it's more of what is it that we are trying to make happen? And what is the quickest way to do it? And I was mentioning again in the pre-show to you, Caitlin, I wrote an article back in 2018 on how to unlock the hidden potential of your vendor network. Back then, the premise was your vendor knows more about the solution they sold you than you do.
They better.
So
No.
why wouldn't you work with them to, you know, if you're stuck, if you're having trouble? And on the flip side, why wouldn't they come in and do, whether it's a quarterly lunch and learn, or we all do, we all get though, these are the feature updates and this is what they mean. And, some software companies will do webinars or they'll release the features, but there's something about really having those direct conversations with the people most impacted by the changes that you're making to really understand if those changes add value to the customer experience. And that's where I feel it's falling flat. And the only ones who are really, I think, having those conversations for the most part are the marketers, because it's our job to find the prospects, nurture the prospects, and turn them into sales qualified leads. You can't do that if you don't know that you're giving them what it is that they want. So that sort of started that whole, 360-degree conversation.
Yeah. And so I think there's like almost two parts to that. It's like the vendors coming in and saying, because they have their relationship. If I'm a software vendor, I'm probably talking to the IT team and, the CTO. I have my little bubble, my network of people. And I need to become a little more forceful and be like, no, 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 no. Please introduce us to the marketing team. Like, please introduce us to, X, Y, and Z teams who are interacting with this software or at least need to know about it. And so it's like the vendors need to become more multi-departmental. But then if I'm a vendor coming in and talking to the marketing team, I shouldn't just be there on my own. Like I should be getting the rest of the vendors who interact with that workflow to come in so we can tell the complete story. And you're not just getting these little fragmented pieces that we then expect you to have to go and piece together. Like, no, 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 no. I think there's this multi vendor communication is just something that we're going to start to see more of, especially if companies start to demand it, right?
I think the only caveat that I would put on that is none of it will work if the customer at the center
Yeah.
does not know who their customer is. If they don't know what problems they're solving for their own customers, then how do they expect the vendor to know what problems to? So it really becomes a domino effect. And it all comes down to truly understanding that at the end of the line, go way to the end of the line, that last touch point, that person who's using it, and then figure out from there, then you swim upstream. But you've got to
Right.
go, to the beach first and find the sunbathers and make sure that they're happy before you can work. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but clearly that's my brain is at the beach today.
On a February day, that's a great one.
All right. Well, Mark, as someone who's on the sales consulting side of things, you're having these conversations. What are you seeing? Do
Yeah,
they
and
customers want?
it's interesting, Caitlin. Joanne brought up a lot of good points, and number one is I think anytime you work from the customer backwards, whether they're on the beach or not, is always a good strategy. Right? The answers to the test are with the people who are, have the actual answers. Those are the customers. If you understand that and work backwards, it makes it a lot easier. And I think not enough sales organizations, whether they're OEMs or PSPs, have that as a intentional strategy and need to think that way a lot more than they do. And so now I'll speak a little bit coming mostly from the OEM vendor side. I've been on all sides of the issue, but I've most of my career on the vendor side. This is not to take a defense of it, but just maybe to set the stage for how we got to where we're at. Many times you might hear a print service provider say, I don't want a lot of finger pointing. I need someone more or less to be my project manager, right? I'm using the term project manager, but over the years, it's been one face to the customer and all of these different things that OEM vendors would then hire their marketing people like Joanne to go out and do this whole big campaign that they are one solution, end-to-end solutions. People will recognize these terms I'm using and probably associate them with the specific companies, right? End-to-end, one face to the customer. So there's been a lot of that, and sometimes it's hard to back away from that from some people. I don't think we're in the same level of, let's call it, lack of knowledge at the print service provider as we were 10 years ago. The ability to get information on the products, the fact that they do 70 or 80% of their research online before they even speak to vendors nowadays. All these things add up that you have a more educated, highly educated and informed print service provider customer. Maybe the one area they're still weak, I think Joanne brought up, is how does it work from their customer backwards, because otherwise you're just pouring good things into a big ocean and it will mean nothing, right? So if you can complete that, think of it like a supply chain, starting with the customer. Print service provider becomes the project manager for the end customer, and the vendors truly then become suppliers as opposed to solution architects, right? And so I think that's happening. Caitlin, to your question, what do I see in organizations today that I speak with? I think there needs to be two things that have to happen. One is more customer backwards approach as opposed to here's what I have, buy it, right? And that's one aspect that I think needs to continue to evolve. And the companies that do better in that are winning, I believe, today, and they are growing. And then you have to formulate we used to call it co-opetition. That's a term that was popular years ago, right? The combination of cooperating and competition. And look, there's a lot of expressions about that, but just don't be too greedy, right? Serve your customers. If you serve them continuously, one way or another, you're going to win in the long run, I believe, right? And so it's okay to share the spotlight and the glory with other vendors if it means the best interest of the customer.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I had not heard of the
Co-opetition?
co-opetition.
You're
Yeah.
not
I
old
must have
enough. You're
missed
just
Yeah.
that,
not old enough.
era of the marketing terms.
Yeah. I had to dust
But
that one off,
It's
Joey.
like
It just
frenemy.
didn't go.
It's like being a frenemy.
right.
Yeah, it's like frenemy. Exactly. Yeah, it's the same. Yeah.
So now we gotta take it to, like, the next iteration, where, yes, it's co-opetition, but, plus, some strategic alignment. And what I think it's interesting as a vendor, right? We're coming in and we're having conversations with like the IT folks or the print operations managers. Like these are the people who like they have boots on the ground. They are not necessarily the customer facing side of the business. And I always go into, my quarterly business reviews and I've scrubbed their website and I try and understand who their customers are and what markets they're serving. And I ask them, to confirm what I've interpreted, but never once have I, unless I'm, talking to an owner, had someone bring in their marketing folks or, just people from different departments who could actually tell me as a vendor, hey, no, this is our strategy. Like, this is how we're trying to serve customers. And this is the value we're bringing in our differentiators. Like, I'm making assumptions and they'll be like, yeah, yeah, those all look good. But ugh, are they just telling me that? And I can't help but think, all right, if I could hear it directly from different people in the company, then the advice I can give you guys on where we should go and where we should position our software would be, I mean, just 10x more valuable. And then extrapolate that one step further. Imagine bringing in multiple vendors who are all touching your workflow. We know what our capabilities are. We've probably worked with these vendors also outside of necessarily your company. And if we all know where you're headed as a company, imagine the strategy that we can create as a multi vendor unit
But
almost.
see, here's the problem, Caitlin, that
Hmm.
I'm seeing more and more. And Mark, your eyes are probably being more open to this as well. Most companies don't know the answers. They
Yeah.
they
Mm.
they don't know. And again, I sound trite whenever I say it, but they really cannot answer who they help, how they help them, and why it matters. And if they can, that's great. But not everybody in the company is going to answer the same way. And that becomes more apparent the more stakeholders you have in a room. Then you get them like arguing, no, that's not what it is. No, that's not what it is. And then the vendor's going like, guys, like,
Oh God, who do I listen
get
to? Yeah.
your like, can I swear
Exactly.
a little bit? Like, get your shit together. Like, what the hell? Like, how do you expect us to help you if you don't even know where you're making money and where you're losing money and where the right clients are? So going back to what Mark said, if you're going in and as a vendor and your goal truly is to help your customer, you really want to help them move the needle, you really want to help them grow or whatever their goals are, get acquired, go public, whatever their goals are, you're there to help them. You will figure out a way to meet with the right people. But if your goal is to sell to them, then that's when we get into this same hamster wheel of everybody like sniping at each other because the pie is getting smaller and smaller and everybody's going after the same piece of pie. Whereas if you look at the rest of the pie and it's like, let's not discard that. There's something there. We can make this, taste good again. I think that's really where it's coming from. I've got a couple of stats that we shared in a webinar that we did, and it says 73% of marketers consider managing partners a major challenge.
Wow. Sorry.
Wow.
Yeah. Despite growing reliance, 39% of companies still lack a formal partner management strategy. So to me,
Yeah.
that says a lot. And
Yeah.
No kidding. The infrastructure's not there.
why? Why? That's the $1,000,000 question. It is why? Why can't we? And we all know the answer.
Resources, limited
It's
time.
money, right?
Yeah.
It's easier to go after that sliver of pie than to do the work of what it really takes to eat, eat the rest of it.
Yeah. And if I can interject something here, Joanne, I'm going to tee this one up for you. What's one thing that's always baffled me to some extent is here you have the print industry. And if you boil down to a simple one sentence of what is the print industry, what do? They develop marketing communications in all ways, shapes, forms, sizes, products, substrate, blah, 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 channels, etc. But how many of them actually have their own marketing person? How
Right.
many?
That was the
Very,
next
I
thing.
don't know, Joanne. You probably know, but it's not a lot. It's not a
No,
big number.
no.
And if you have, that just, it's incredible to me that here they are bringing that expertise and execution to marketing communications globally in all industries in a sense, but they don't, not only don't do well marketing themselves, they don't even have someone who's primarily tasked with that. And you have these small and medium sized businesses that are founder led, which is fine, but they probably didn't come from marketing. They probably came from finance or operations, most likely. And that's all a mystery to them. And if they spend $1 and they don't get a return by tomorrow, they're out. Right. And well, Joanne, I'll let you take it from here.
Well, no. I mean, at the end of marketing is a cash center. Like we cost the company money. We don't make the company money, which I completely disagree with. But
So do I.
when you look at it on paper, it's a cost to get that lead in until they become qualified for sales to take it over the finish line. So, this opens up a very different can of worms between sales and marketing. But, Caitlin, you made a really strong point when you said, you're speaking with the IT people. Well, IT people have very different goals, are measured against very different objectives when it comes to their own personal bonuses and plans and whatever. They're not measured on how many leads came in. They're measured on how secure their environment is, how many breaches they were able to prevent, how quickly or how efficiently. They're not measured on the same things a marketer is. So they're not going to ask the same questions as somebody who's in marketing or somebody who's in sales. That's why it's important for all the departments to and taking it back a notch when the company understands who they're speaking to. And they
Mhm.
might be speaking to somebody in operations, and they might be speaking to somebody in finance, and somebody in marketing, and somebody in sales, and somebody in IT.
Yeah.
The story has to be different for each person because it's got to resonate with what matters to them. But it still has to be part of that umbrella um, um, solution that is being provided. So again, it comes back to truly that understanding of at the end of the day, what is it that we're trying to do? And how can we all collectively help this customer achieve their goal? Because guess what? When they achieve their goal, we all get more work. We all help each other. So, I, I,
Yeah. Well, and it's just interesting because, all right, imagine that company knows what they do. And we just check that. That would be great. But then there's just this whole educational component that I think is missing the more I listen to both of you. And like in a perfect world, what I see is, an all hands meeting with the heads of department for, marketing and ops and finance and IT and sitting down with the core vendors who touch their workflow. And then, I mean, it's just an educational session on what the workflow does, what the vendors contribute to it, where, the vendors are going strategically. And it's this collaborative session where not only are the vendors there to listen to like the goals and the strategies of the business, but then they're also here to learn what the heck we're doing as vendors to their company and the services we provide, and together finding that vision for the future so that these strategic conversations maybe each vendor is having one-on-one. I just don't know how, if you have 10, 20, 30 vendors to manage, how a CTO can have strategic conversations with each one, have different roadmaps with each one, and then have that all boil down into one strategic roadmap. Like, that just doesn't sound possible. So I'm assuming it's not happening, but maybe Mark, you could lend some light on that. You're having these combos with your.
Yeah, and I was just thinking of Joanne's 39% number. Just what you just described is going to scare most people away from even attempting it, right? It's true what you said, right? It has to happen, and a lot of small and medium businesses just aren't equipped, even if they have the money, on a
Yeah.
percentage basis to do something. I think there's a lot of fear in this. I'll give a couple of examples of ways I think. Let's shift into maybe what are some ways to address this. As a vendor, when I had a sales meeting with my team, I always brought in one of our customers and so they would be the print service provider in this case. And I always brought them in to explain not how they used or what, but why. Why was it important, right? Why was it important that we had this feature? Why was it important? Because they have customers who expect X, Y, and Z, right? And they gave us the why so that people then would understand why the customer is asking them to do something that they might not think is important, or they wouldn't have thought of, or it's not a high priority, but for them it's everything. So I think take that a step further. I would envision a print service provider wants to tackle this problem. How about assembling your key vendors? Maybe you can't get all of them. Maybe that's too much, but 4, 5, 6, something like that, and bring in an end user customer and have them explain the same thing. Here's why I do business with this print service provider. Here's what they do that's important to me. Here's why it's valuable. Now you guys basically work it out, right? And then they can leave
Yeah.
the call or the room or the meeting or whatever. But then everybody hears the same thing at the same time. And it's from the person who's literally paying everyone's salary. If you really think about it, right? If
Yeah.
they're not buying, then none of us are in business or making money, right? So I just think that philosophy of customer backwards, give them the voice, give them a microphone, let them explain why, right? And then everybody pull together and work backwards from that. And then I circle back and agree with what Joanne said. That's how everybody wins, right? That's how the business grows, the industry grows, repeat business grows, horizontal business grows, within customers. And by the way, you get some nice reference and trust by doing things like that, right? So now the marketing department actually has something that they can sell, right?
I agree. Why is probably the most important question you could ask. And I think even internally, that should be asked before even the RFQ goes out to the vendors. Why why are we doing, and ask all of the various stakeholders, why are we investing in X? What is it that we hope it's going to achieve for us, for our customers? Did we even ask our customers if this is something they want? Um, have all of those why conversations before you reach out to the vendor, because guess what? The vendor's going to ask you why, hopefully. And you
Yeah.
have to be able to answer, not because we think and not because that's what the data shows us. It's because we actually picked up the phone or wrote an email and asked why. It and we sat back and we didn't say another word until they answered. And if they didn't know the answer, we helped them figure out the answer. So, test different hypotheses. Like, that's where it all has to start. Um, I was reading up those stats before. The more than half of strategic partnerships fail due to unrealistic expectations, failure to agree on objectives, and a lack of trust or communication.
Yeah.
It, you know, so it's not rocket science. I mean, it really just comes down to having the conversations we need to have with the right people. The bigger question is, what's preventing us from doing that? It can't be time. It can't be, there's a reason why we're not doing it. And that's the why I want to uncover.
Yeah.
Why isn't it happening? Is it this fear of competition where, oh, I worked for a software company, and notorious on the show floor every night, they would take all the collateral and hide it. I'm like, why? Oh, because we don't want the competition grabbing it. And I'm like, guys, like, there's nothing on here that's not on the website. They
Right.
already have this information. Like, I
Yeah.
can understand if, oh, but there's a screenshot. I'm like, you telling me that they've not seen that before? Like, give me a break. They've
Right.
all seen it. They all know it. Half the people are working for the company that worked here. I mean, come on. Like, let's be real.
So true.
So I call bullshit on that. I want to know why. Is it because we're scared to hear the answers? Is it because we're afraid that we're going to look foolish because we don't know the answer and have to ask why? That's what I think the real reason is. Nobody wants to ask the question because it means they don't know the answer. And it could just be as simple as that. I hope that's not the reason, because if it is, it's a real easy one to overcome.
Hmm. Yeah. I
Mark, what are
mean,
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I take what you said and go a step further on that. The software vendor has probably the most challenging aspect of that of everybody, because the software provider is not at the end of anything. Like, they're always in the middle. They're always connecting. They're always building bridges. They're always reliant on somebody on one side or the other. And hardware vendors are can be very hard, right, about how they approach these situations, and very finite, and so sometimes there's obstacles there. Occasionally there's some legitimate things as it relates to machine language, operator press, and things like that. That's understandable. Everybody gets that, but there's a lot of things that happen from the time the end client has an idea and uploads an Illustrator file or whatever, all the way till it starts to get printed. That's still where 90% of everything happens. And the printing has become, I think everyone would agree with this. Printing is the easiest part now. It's making all of the other things work that really requires creativity and knowledge. And also, that's where your differentiation can really come in and how quickly you can work. So, yeah, there is some fear, Joanne. I would say equally for the hardware people that if we're working with Rockame and they're working with Canon and or HP, then I'm not going to work with them. That's people have to drop those kind of thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Because, first of all, let's all take wins where we can, number one. And number two, let's help customers win. And the more we do that, the more we should win overall.
Yep.
and I think just to kind of close this out, I would say from my own experience as a vendor, never once has a client asked, "Hey, I'm getting all my vendors together. I need you to be there." Like, that has just never come up. And so the more I'm talking to people about this, I'm like, okay, if I'm not being asked, then I would be doing my customers a disservice if I'm not the one asking them, "Hey, have you thought about doing this type of meeting? This is what I think we could all get out of it." Plant the seed. So, that's the action item I'm taking away as a vendor. And I think you guys have planted some great, seeds on action items they can take and need to take internally. Because I think the evolution of where this could go from a strategic supply chain management and vendor management perspective is something that could add so much value to these
Yes.
individual print service providers so that they can differentiate more, provide more value, do things just that help them grow and help the industry grow. And I mean, that's what we're really all about is just how do we not stay stagnant because we can't. This industry will eat us up if we do.
This industry can't afford for us to be stagnant. We're we're
Right.
we're we're at that an inflection point now where we really have to recognize that there's strength in numbers, there's strength in community, and
Yep.
there's enough to go around if we all work together. But if we all start becoming sort of selfish and just going after that sliver of the pie because it's the lowest hanging fruit and it's easy and we'll make money there and ignore the rest of it, that's when it just, I don't know. Th-
Yeah.
that's where I see the beginning of the end. I don't want to look that way. So I prefer to see the beginning for the beginning.
And I'll say that I think some people are doing it on the positive note. There are some, and
Sure.
I think there are at both at the PSP side and on the vendor side.
Hmm.
And I believe those are the companies that are truly growing today. And that should be the model that people are
Yep.
looking at. If you want to expand your business, if you want to diversify, if you want to have satisfied customers instead of, angry people on on your website, help solve the problems, drop the ego. Don't be afraid to ask for help. That's another thing. Money is definitely an issue, like you pointed out, Joanne, but also asking for help is a universal problem, not just in the printing industry, right? So,
And be honest. Just be
yeah,
honest. And again, honesty, transparency, communicate. To your point, if you don't know the answer, I'm going to find out.
yeah,
I'm going to ask the rest of my network for the answer because there's a reason the question was asked.
yep. And Caitlin, kudos to you for raising this. I think it's a great point, and you're clearly looking out for not just the best interests of your employer, but I think overall for customers. So, I'm glad you did this, and it was it's an honor to be on here. And thanks for asking us to be here. I hope we were helpful to your audience.
Oh, thank you guys so much for joining. And, we're going to wrap up right on time. I'm actually really proud of us. So thank you so much for joining. And
Yes.
until next time, you guys,
Thank you, Caitlin.
that's
Thank you,
right.
Caitlin. Great to see you. You too, Joanne. Bye bye now.
Bye.